What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the second album by Alice in Chains. Basically, this project is called Dirt, and it came out in the fall of 1992. Now, this is a pretty huge album here, especially in grunge music, and especially in 90s music, I would have to say. It's definitely a staple of rock music overall. It's just pretty much damn near like a classic rock album. Depending on who you talk to, there might be more folks, more than others, that think it's like a full-blown classic. It's definitely one of the better rock albums in recent memory, despite the fact that it's over 30 years old. But I still look at the concept as this is just a real effectual kind of album. Did a lot of things right. Lane Staley was completely in his prime here, despite the fact that the drug use was kind of going on around this time. I just would have to say this is just an overall quality album. There should have been like dozens more albums like this. I definitely would have to say. Now I'm excited to listen to eventually Alice in Chains' 1995 album, which is the last album that has Lane Staley on there. But Jerry Cantrell is kind of on that album more, but I would have to say, which is not a bad thing. Jerry Cantrell is more on like the 1995 album Alice in Chains, which is not a bad thing. But I just kind of I'm used to like the albums I know more as of the moment would be like the stuff that was with Lane Staley, like Faceless. Stuff I'm more familiar with Alice in Chains currently is stuff like Jar of Flies and Dirt and Facelift and some of those type ones. So I definitely am excited to get to more Alice in Chains and see some more about this. But this is definitely a pretty quality album here. There's a lot of good things to talk about with it. It's definitely pretty much a damn near classic, would have to say. Just did a lot of things right. This is probably just all over throughout VH1 and MTV back in the 90s and stuff. It just felt like I would say Lane Staley and Alice in Chains were pretty close to being on par with Nirvana and Kurt Cobain in terms of overall ubiquitousness throughout the early 90s and that type of stuff. It's just really too bad that there wasn't more that could have been done in terms of the concept of getting this more expressed and just having them be on tour more and that type of stuff as far as just the problems that kind of went on. But I look after just being able to say that this is a pretty excellent album. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the singles here. Yeah, just the widespread appeal of this album. There were 5 singles on this particular album, which is quite a bit, especially for like they just really went to town with promoting this particular album. It just did a lot of damage throughout the early 90s and such, and it just carried right over into Jar of Flies, which was another hit project. And I reviewed that back in May of this year, so I would go ahead and say to check out that review also, because that's a pretty quality project. Just an acoustic album, if you didn't know. Just would have to say, so that's some good stuff. But yeah, basically the 5 singles, the first single on here is Wood. This is a really excellent song. This came out in the summer of 92. So this is kind of a doom-like, dark, ghastly rock staple, I would have to say. It's very melodic and ambient, I would have to say, and it's very melodic and ambient in an edgy sense, I would have to say, and it's just a classic 90s hit. So this is definitely one, I think you can pretty much continue to hear Wood on radio today. I've heard it a number of times throughout the past several years. Just an easy kind of highlight, just a ubiquitous kind of song. Lane Staley completely nails the vocals on this song. It's really Lane Staley completely nails the vocals on this song. Just an easy kind of hit, and it's just really a factory kind of 90s hit out of rock music that just had a lot of energy, and just 30 years later continues to be a staple, I would have to say. It's just an easy kind of one. Just one of the premier kind of songs to go to for Alice in Chains. If you don't know a thing about them, or if you're new to them, or if you just don't have like the entire scope of what they've done, this is a simple kind of hit and just an easy kind of highlight. Just probably one of the better songs of this. Yeah, probably one of the more defining 90s rock songs, I would have to say. It's just an easy kind of highlight. Them Bones is the second single, and this is another haunting one. It has the same kind of up-tempo swing of Wood. I would have to say it's a looming kind of ghastly metal social gem. I definitely feel like it feels like 90s radio staple. It's another 90s radio staple. I would have to say it's a vintage hit. It's a vintage hit, definitely, and it's very catchy. So this one, Wood and Them Bones are a great 1-2 punch. They just have some shrill energy, and there's a lot of songs on this album that have like hangout kind of energy, I would definitely say. Them Bones is an easy kind of one to kick it with your buzz and just kind of get turned up and cranked, have some beers passed around and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just some easy kind of highlights for that. But this is another one that I think could be heard on the radio often enough. And the thing about like when I think of 90s radio, or when I think of Alice in Chains off this album, Dirt, the surprising thing about it is it just feels like there are some songs off this album that kind of were promoted as singles, despite the fact that they weren't actually singles. Like you could hear them on the radio. Like I want to say you might have been able to hear Damn That River on the radio, despite the fact that that's not a single. And I wouldn't be surprised if Rain When I Die was one. And there's just like the 5 singles off this album are pretty interchangeable. It's not just like Wood as getting the lion's share of the promotion or the radio play even 30 years later in Them Bones. I mean, I've heard Angry Chair, I've heard Rooster. I I don't recall as much hearing Down in the Hole, but I probably have. I just didn't know that song as well. I like that song a lot more now, but there's just, five interchangeable songs like Damn That River, possibly Rain When I Die, some of those type ones. So it just had a lot of airplay that this album particularly got. It's pretty good. The third single is Angry Chair, and this is kind of a factory and ready to go late day makeshift song, I would have to say. It has a productive feel about it and a sterner kind of aesthetic. So I just would have to say this is kind of one that's not quite as much of a party cut, not quite as much of just like a hangout kind of gem. This is definitely one where you just got off work, but you're kind of in a more rock and metal sense. It's a little bit more edginess. Angry Chair is kind of one to have in a makeshift sense and a more edgy and rugged kind of sense. This kind of definitely, if you're not the pop type radio and the softer stuff just on like the airwaves back, especially in those 90s days, was just a little bit too soft going. This is some makeshift kind of stuff that just kind of keeps the edge, but just kind of is something shrill to kind of have for just those after work sessions as far as that kind of goes. Definitely feel like this is a pretty good makeshift song. And there's not a ton of makeshift songs on this particular album, but this is definitely a gem for that. This has a real kind of engaging riff. It's a little bit more abstract and kind of not necessarily awkward, but just kind of offhanded, I would have to say. But I do like the concept of getting this one. It's just another highlight, definitely. This one's not quite as rickety and as riveting as like Wood and Them Bones, but it's not a bad song at all. It's definitely another sheer highlight that this is kind of more meant for like after hours, work after hours kind of malaise as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of windy down type tune, or just kind of settling and just kind of getting some snacks and getting back to the crib and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. But then the tempo kind of switches with these next couple singles. So Rooster is the fourth single, and this is kind of about being in the military and that type of stuff. I have seen pieces of the music video. It's a real kind of looming and haunting music video. Definitely like that one. This is very much like a looming kind of ghoulish rock ballad, I would have to say. Definitely like the feel of this particular song. It's a strengthy song, and Lane Staley completely kills the vocals here. And it's just an ambient kind of relaxed cut, I would have to say. This is just a very good one. The vocals are just so melodic and catchy on this particular song. I mean, typically I don't like songs too oftenly over about 6 or 6 and typically I don't like songs too often over 6 minutes as such, but this is definitely one that just has a very powerful emphasis and it's just very emphatic and managed to pull it off. Lane Staley just completely just oozes like charisma on this particular song. It's just such a powerful song that just has a lot of strength he feels about it and just works overall. It's an easy kind of one to hear just on the radio and just kind of mellow out to, I would have to say. And then Down in a Hole is the fifth single. This is a sleepy, soft rock blazer. I would have to say it's a new hit angle for Alice in Chains. Definitely just had a new particular vibe that it kind of gave off on this particular song. It's pretty good. Has some mellow vibes about it, and it's just an offhanded kind of ambient hit, I would have to say. So this is just kind of one. Like I read about this song on Wikipedia, and it said it's just kind of like a more sluggish relationship type song that Jerry Cantrell wrote just about the problems that he. Down in a Hole is kind of a song that Jerry Cantrell wrote about a relationship that he was having. So it's a concept about that is pretty good on here. It's just kind of an offhanded song. It's very ambient. There are some ambient songs on here. I feel like Rooster, Down in a Hole, and like there's a couple other ones that are on here, like Rain When I Die is another good example of just some of these more ambient ones. But and even though Wood is kind of like a more like rickety kind of song, I feel like Wood's a pretty good ambient one just because of the smooth vocals and melodies on there. Also, there's just some good melodic kind of ones, but this is definitely one that's just not quite a hard, edgy kind of rock blazer. Down in the Hole is just not quite a hard, edgy type rock hit. It's just got a softer kind of approach, just very sleepy and drowsy. It's just a real kind of simmering blazer that just works pretty well for summer. It's just kind of a good song for chicas as far as that kind of goes, especially for Alice in Chains' angle because they're more kind of thrash, not necessarily thrash, but just kind of edgier, tougher, darker riff type metal like they normally are. But this is just an abstract one and it works. So it's a good concept. But so yeah, there's a lot to talk about good on this particular album. There's 13 songs on this album, and out of those 13, I wound up recommending to you 10. So I'll go ahead and talk about the 3 songs I didn't recommend, which is pretty easy and simple to kind of dissect here. Is just Sick Man, Godsmack, and Hate to Feel. And all 3 of these songs just kind of have awkward templates, and the riffage is just not quite as good on these. Like I feel like Godsmack just had kind of a kind of plain and just not engaging kind of riff on there. Sick Man was just not an interesting arrangement as to how that song kind of happened in the format. It was the same thing with Hate to Feel. These were just kind of ones where they just compared to songs like Damn That River, Them Bones, Wood, some of those type ones, Angry Chair, some of those type moments. I just feel like they were just less engaged and just didn't quite have the affability that they probably needed to kind of have. It just was not common. It wasn't common for these slip ups on this particular album, but those are just the only 3 real ones. I feel like the electricity just isn't full blown there. So that's kind of the concept. But to talk about some of these, Like, Damn That River is another highlight that's just like them, Bones, and Wood. I would definitely have to say it's a great touching down kind of rock hit. Definitely, it's an easy hangout bop, I would have to say, and it's just got stellar energy and summery kind of catchiness. So there's just some highlights on here. This is another kind of hangout type situation. I would have to say there's a ton of these songs on here, just great for some hangout. These are definitely some good ones for some PlayStation sessions, some Swisher sessions, that type of stuff, some snackage, some of those type moments as far as that kind of goes. Just some good highlights to kind of have. MTV is on some of those type moments, or VH1, some of those type things. Watching Jackass, some of those type moments. Just watching like Pulp Fiction, some of those type moments as far as that kind of goes. Just some good concepts about that. Just a real overall good highlight. And then Junkhead is another nice one. I really like the riffs on this song. This has one of the album's better riffs. Definitely enjoyed Junkhead. This is a Doom-like, kind of darker hangout gem, I would have to say. It's a good song to get cranked to, definitely. And it's got brooding riffs, and it's just it's very engaging sludge rock, I would have to say. Just very engaging sludge rock, I would have to say. I just like the grunge appeal of this one. The thing about Alice in Chains grunge on this particular album is it's just a lot darker and more shrill. Like, Nirvana was definitely more commercial, and I feel like Pearl Jam was a lot more alternative, and Soundgarden was just a lot more warped and almost druggy. I would have to say that Alice in Chains is just like the darkest of like the main grunge bands. It definitely has the appeal of it. Junkhead is just one of the darkest songs in this album. It really feels like, I mean, I know the implications of this song imply that there was a lot heavier drug use than just some beers and smoking swishers and that type of stuff. But I just would have to say that the concept about it just really works for some great hangout songs to kind of have just in the lighter sense, just within that context. Just some good stuff. Easy kind of hangout song for, just the stuff I described as far as that kind of goes. Rain When I Die is kind of a surprising song. This is kind of an offhanded song. That's just kind of a balmy highlight on here. It's kind of summary, but it just has such powerful lyrics, and just the melodies and vocals on the song are particularly strong. So this is a strengthy, kind of regular late day highlight, I would have to say. An easy kind of one that's kind of makeshift, has some makeshift bounce about it, and it's just similar to Angry Chair, I would have to say, in terms of the makeshift feel, and it's just peppy. This kind of has like that same kind of ambient kind of summary type feel, 4 o'clock, 5:30 p.m., something like that. Just got done with work, some of those type sessions. Just as far as that kind of goes, just some real makeshift bounce. I feel like this probably could be a song that you could hear on the radio on the right day. I mean, there's so many interchangeable songs off this album. It just really works extremely well. Definitely like the arrangement of this particular song. And the melodies on the song are just excellent. Like, Lane Staley really nails the hook on here. It's just a real beautiful type hook. This works extremely well. This has some good stuff on here. And then Dirt, the title track, is another highlight off this album. This is just a stretching kind of hangout track, I would have to say. It's a regular afternoon hit, and it's kind of a snackage and smoke session type bop, I would have to say. And it just has vintage 90s feel about it, and it's pretty melodic. So this is another one where Lane Staley just soars on here, and the band does pretty good job. Also to say, I mean, the band and Lane Staley, they both do excellent on this album. This is prime stuff from Alice in Chains. They just nail it from all angles. The vocals, the instrumentals, the melodies, all that stuff is really taken care of. So this is just prime stuff, minus those 3 songs I mentioned that didn't have that complete faction. But just other than that, every song just hits the nail on the head with the melodies, the instrumentation, all that. It's just some good stuff on here. Easy kind of snackage song to kind of kick back, have some snacks, pizza, stuff like that, fried chicken, some of that type of stuff, just smoke sessions, swishers, zigzags, that type of stuff. As far as that kind of goes, just an easy kind of highlight. I mean, this is just another good hangout song. Feel like Junkhead, Dirt, Damn That River, Wood, Them Bones. These are all some great songs to kind of have in just like a regular kind of factory hangout session. As far as that kind of goes, just a good highlight. And then Untitled, which is song number 10. This is the song between Godsmack and Hate to Feel. This is not really like it doesn't really supposedly have like a song title, but this is just a good intro-like song, I would have to say. Really feels like doom rock, and it sounds frenetic and shrill, I definitely feel like, and it just has a haunting feel, and it's just an overall good interlude. So this one just kind of has some real shrill vocals. It's not Lane Staley on there. Just kind of has like some almost kind of goon-like, gremlin-like type feel about it, just the way it kind of goes. Just typical kind of doom and thrash metal type stuff, and grunge metal as far as that kind of goes. Just works in a real highlighted type hit. Just a real kind of leery kind of one that just it's just a leery type song. This overall has like a shrill feel that just works extremely well. So that's another good one. Just it's kind of a good extra to throw on the album, I would have to say. That takes care of the album. So me liking 10 songs out of 13 on here. So me liking 10 songs out of 13 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 9.25 out of 10. It's just like a hair shy of getting like a 10 out of 10. If there had been one extra song on here or something like that, if there had been 14 songs, I would have liked 11 out of 14. Probably would have gotten a 10 out of 10. It's kind of a compact album, which is not really a problem. It's just the fact that they're just Yeah, it was just a song shy probably of getting like a perfect score, I'd have to say, but it is a damn near classic album. I mean, 5 singles that were ubiquitous and lots of interchangeable songs that you can still hear on the radio 30 years later. The vocals, the instrumentation is just great on here. The song topics, all this sort of stuff. It's just a real demonic and kind of dark oriented type album that just hits the nail on the head. Just an overall demonic and dark oriented type album that just hits the nail on the head over and over again and just happens to really be a shrill project that just has the perfect aesthetic and feel about it. And just really has excellent vocals and melodies and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. So it's just a good highlight. The social score, I'm going to give a 10 out of 10 because this has a lot of ubiquitous radio songs on here, 5 stretching singles. A lot of these are pretty interchangeable. I'd say over half the album has something that you've probably heard on the radio at some point. This has a lot of good songs that are still popular 30 years later and that type of stuff. This has a lot of good moments, some hangout songs, some makeshift songs, some good dark haunting kind of metal that just has like a powerful aesthetic, and even some songs that kind of have some connectability and just overall heartfelt kind of vibes that just kind of make for some character, just for some ruminating, just some overall connection kind of vibes as far as that's kind of concerned. I mean, this is a dark album, but it's not dark the whole way through. There are some moments that are more personable and kind of work in that sort of sense. So it's just a good concept to kind of have lots of good angles to kind of have on here. So it's just a good concept of that. In terms of the future, like Alice in Chains doesn't drop that frequently, but they do have some other projects I'm going to get to. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to reviewing Alice in Chains from '95, and they do have some other albums after that, but I'm going to get to some more of these, and this is definitely an album that you need to invest in.